Before we begin today's tale, I'd like to ask you to check out a friend's new channel. He's putting together some unforgettable true life stories, and you can find the link in the description below. While you consider subscribing and giving a like or a comment, let me take you into today's story. A story that might just shake the foundation of everything you thought you knew. Have you ever experienced one of those moments when your entire world flips in an instant? One minute you believe you understand your life, and the next everything crumbles. That was me, frozen in a kitchen hallway, trembling with a half-full glass of water clutched so tightly I feared it might shatter. I wasn't meant to hear what I did. I was simply passing by the bedroom on my way to the kitchen when I overheard my wife's voice, soft, intimate, not meant for my ears. I stood paralyzed as her laughter, cool and detached, spilled through the open door. A laugh that spoke of decisions already made, of someone else now capturing her attention. There she lay on our bed with her back to the door, legs crossed and moving languidly as if the world did not matter. Her words, whispered with a careless nonchalance, cut directly to the core of my being. "I know. It's just, I don't feel anything when he touches me. I tolerate it because it's not exciting," she confessed, followed by another soft, knowing laugh that made it clear she was guarding secrets I never wished to hear. In that moment, my heart pounded fiercely and my grip tightened on the glass. I could have stormed into that room, demanded answers, and demanded a justification for every cold word, every whisper of indifference. But something in me shifted. I recognized that shouting or pleading wouldn't erase the betrayal or mend the pieces of my shattered trust. Instead, I decided that if she no longer craved my touch, then I would never let her feel it again. I turned away, set my glass down, and allowed every word she uttered to seep into me like a slow poison. From that moment on, the woman I had loved began to vanish. I became a silent observer in my own home, a ghost drifting through familiar spaces, leaving behind no trace of the passion we once shared. At first, she didn't even notice my withdrawal. In the early days, she busied herself with her phone, laughing at messages and preparing for work as though nothing had changed. At dinner, I sat across from her mechanically, and at night, I deliberately kept my distance from the side of the bed where she used to find comfort. It wasn't until a week later that a small sign of awareness crept into her routine. A tentative, "Hey, are you all right?" as I stood at the sink. I forced a smile that held no real warmth and muttered something about just thinking things over. That brief encounter only deepened the silent gulf between us. As the days passed, subtle rejections turned into calculated actions. Watching a movie without pausing for her, returning late from work with no explanation, and letting her curiosity gnaw at her like a slow, relentless ache. Then came the turning point. Gradually, the small neglects grew bolder. One Friday night, when she returned home expecting our ritual of movie nights, she discovered the remote already in my hand. "You started the movie without me?" she asked, surprise and hurt mingled on her face. I only nodded, showing no sign of sharing that intimate moment. The following day when I was late, she confronted me, her eyes searching mine for a sign of remorse. "Where were you?" she demanded, arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. My response was a simple shrug and a dismissal. Just another move in the game of emotional distance I had begun. Each small rebuff was a calculated cut. With every act of ignoring, every refusal of her attempts to reconnect, I made sure the silence between us grew heavier. I no longer reached out for her hand, no longer asked about her day. I became nothing more than a specter in our home, deliberately fading away until she recognized, too late, what she was losing. There was a moment when her efforts to bridge our gap became painfully apparent. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she mustered the courage to ask, "Do you want to go out for dinner tonight?" Her tone was hopeful, seeking reassurance that maybe the spark was still alive. I looked up briefly and replied with a nonchalant, "Nah, not really feeling it," then returned to reading my book. The simplest gestures, the shared morning touch, an invitation for dinner, a quiet attempt at conversation, became tests I refused to pass. It all came crashing when I discovered the truth. 3 weeks after overhearing her casual confession that she no longer wanted to be touched by me, I found undeniable evidence. Late one night, as I lay in bed aimlessly scrolling on my phone, a notification flashed on her screen while she was in the bathroom. A single message preview with the words, "Tonight was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you," signed only with the letter K. My heart remained strangely calm. I had suspected her betrayal for a while, yet now the confirmation was undeniable. At that moment, something inside me clicked. Up until then, I had played the long game of psychological withdrawal, counting on silence to impose its revenge. Now, armed with evidence and a cold determination, I felt the balance shift. The next morning, I called in sick to work. As she left with a half-hearted kiss on my cheek, I waited exactly 20 minutes before turning on my laptop. Step 1. Figure out who K was. My investigation was swift. A pattern of late-night calls, furtive text messages, and a trail of clues that led me to a mid-level executive named Kevin, a man whose polished exterior masked his manipulative intent. In the days that followed, I became both ghost and hunter. I tracked messages, shadowed her late nights at a fancy hotel, and even placed a discreet Bluetooth tracker on her car. Everything was done within the bounds of the law, but with a meticulous intent to collect every scrap of betrayal. I eventually hired a private investigator who provided photos, texts, and video footage that confirmed every secret rendezvous. I could have confronted her then and there, but I knew that exposing her blatant lies would be too simple a victory. Instead, I resolved to dismantle the life she cared so little about, as she had dismantled our marriage piece by piece. One night before I made my ultimate move, she tried to bridge the emotional gulf. Sitting close on the couch, she gently said, "Hey, I feel like we've drifted apart lately." I looked at her, my face giving nothing away. "Yeah," I replied coolly. "I've been thinking." That brief exchange was more telling than she realized. As she continued, her words full of regret and desperation, I let silence settle between us. I smiled, the same soft, reassuring smile from days gone by. But it was laced with an indifference that chilled her. When she thought she had me back for just a moment, shock replaced her relief as she learned that tomorrow would be the worst day of her life. That very night, while she prepared for bed, I left an envelope on her pillow, a damning collection of texts, photos, and screenshots of every lie. When she returned, her eyes froze on the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. I said nothing, just watched as her hands trembled while she sifted through tangible proof of betrayal. Her breathing turned shallow, and the utter realization of what she had lost washed over her like a tidal wave. Slowly, I leaned forward and, in a soft yet chilling tone, said, "You don't have to hug me anymore. You don't have to pretend. I'm done." I wasn't angry. I wasn't screaming. I was simply indifferent, letting the weight of every broken promise sink in. In that moment, she saw what she had done. Regret settled in, not with the intensity of fury, but with the slow, poisonous creep of guilt. I watched her as she tried to form words to salvage what remained, but every attempt just reminded her she had lost me long ago. Over the following weeks, I continued my silent campaign. I ignored her calls, refused her attempts at conversation, and made sure every small daily interaction screamed indifference. Even when she tried to recapture the warmth of our past, making my coffee in the morning or asking if I wanted dinner together, I dismissed her efforts with simple, cold rejections. And then, 1 week later, the breaking point came. I heard her raw, gut-wrenching cries in the kitchen. I sat in the living room, deliberately scrolling through my phone as she broke down only a few feet away. Her breaking point was heralded by a sudden outburst. She stormed into the room, disheveled and red-eyed, demanding, "Are you seriously just going to ignore me forever? Why won't you fight back?" I met her gaze, a slight smirk on my face, and replied softly, "Yes." Those two words were enough to shatter whatever remnants of hope she clung to. I told her calmly, "You don't deserve my anger, my time, or my care." Hearing her whisper that I was a fool, I simply countered, "You thought I'd never leave? You thought that despite all your lies, I'd be here waiting?" In that moment, she knew that not only was our marriage over, but she had also lost herself. For 2 weeks, I maintained my silence, watching as she desperately tried to win back what was already gone. Then one evening, I quietly packed just the essentials and left. In the doorway, she pleaded, "Can we talk?" I merely met her eyes with the same cold, indifferent smile, handed her the damning envelope, and walked out without a backward glance. As I stepped into a future without her, a perverse satisfaction filled me. She had craved distance, freedom, even a taste of excitement. Now she was left with everything that she had selfishly demanded. The crushing loneliness and regret that comes when you realize you've lost something irreplaceable. That night, I didn't just leave. I erased every trace of myself from her life. I blocked her number, ignored her emails, and even distanced myself from mutual friends. I became nothing more than a ghost, the ghost of the man she once knew, and now, the man she could never have again. The fallout was far-reaching. Her indiscretions weren't confined to our crumbling marriage. I made sure that everyone in her world eventually heard the truth. I sent the evidence to those who needed to know, including Kevin's wife. In an instant, their carefully constructed fantasy burst into flames. A divorce was filed, possessions were claimed, and within 2 weeks of my departure, Kevin was out of her life as abruptly as he had entered. Months passed. I rebuilt my life with a newfound sense of peace, stability, and freedom. New routines, a new home. Everything felt lighter without the weight of betrayal. And then one evening, a message flashed on my phone. "Can we talk? I just need to see you." I read and reread the words, almost amused by their desperation. She had played her game and lost. Now she wanted to undo the past. But some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. I didn't respond. I even blocked the number, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices alone. Dear listeners, as you absorb this story, take a moment to reflect on the cost of betrayal and the price of indifference. The silence I wielded was not merely an absence of noise. It was a carefully executed form of justice. If you found this emotional journey compelling, be sure to subscribe to our channel, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these stories alive. This is a story about how regret festers, how indifference can be more damaging than fury, and how sometimes the only revenge worth having is reclaiming your own life. The memory of betrayal is a heavy burden, but when that burden becomes a weapon, it cuts deeper than any shout. And as you listen, remember, the echoes of lost love and shattered trust can haunt you long after the last word is spoken.